Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
First speaker, Bob.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bob LEMPKE. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is the 13th of January, 1964, which means I'm coming up on 44 years. All right. This is an odd feeling for me today. This is the first time in all my years in AA that I'm the new kid on the block. and the first time that my sponsor and I sit on the same panel. That's really something. And so I'm eternally grateful. Is he telling a story? While I was sitting there, there's guys at home in bed at night, you know, knock on the door. He gets out of bed, goes downstairs, opens the door. Here's some drunks standing there, weaving back and forth. He said, I need a push. He says, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, go to hell. Slammed the door. Went back up, crawled in bed. His wife says, who is that? He says, some drunk. Wanted a push. She says, you aren't going to help him? No. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. She says, remember last week when some guy came along and helped you push your car when the battery was dead? He says, oh, all right. And he got his bathrobe on, went down, opened up the door, and he couldn't see the guy. He hollered, hey, Joe, where are you? He says, over here. Over where? He said, on the swing. Makes sense to me. I'm what this book says, a real alcoholic. In fact, I'm one of them bar drinking drunks. Are any bar drinkers here today? Thank God. I mean, I don't know where the rest of you did your thing, but if you didn't get some bar time in, you missed a lot of fun. I loved everything about those joints, you know. I love everything that goes on in there. I like the smell in there. I like them stools you can spin around on. I like the mirrors they got in those places, you know. All right. Jim and I could go out here tomorrow on the main boulevard, open up a joint here in, what's the name of this town? Santa Clarita. Really sharp, you know. We could open up a joint without a mirror. Fact of life, we'd go broke in 2 weeks. That mirror in the bar is not there for social drinkers. Bars cannot survive on social drinkers. You bar drinkers know what I'm talking about. And they come in there and have a couple drinky poos, and then they start saying weird off the wall kind of crap like, ooh, I'm getting dizzy, I'm going home. I mean, we stay there all day, and we have to have something to entertain ourselves, and it's usually our own image, thus the mirror. Yeah, we sit there all day staring in the mirror, you know, figuring things out. I love them jukeboxes they have in places, you know, the ones that play Born to Lose all day. You remember that? That's one of the greatest drinking songs there is, you know. And so I spent a lot of time in bars. And then I had this other problem that really caused me no end of problems. Besides being an alcoholic, I had this thing. It's called big shot-itis. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm a big shot-itis in the bar. You know, give them all a drink, bartender. Big shot, big shot. Oh, do it again. You know, pretty soon the whole paycheck's gone. And I'm in deep doo-doo. And I call my brother. And he's one of those social drinkers, you know. And I call him, and he lives in San Francisco. And I tell him I had this little financial problem here. if he'd be so kind to send me some money. And he would send me money. And 2 weeks later, he would call and say, I heard you're drinking again. I could have said, what else is new? But I would say, well, I'm trying, I'm trying. And then I think, how the hell does he know that? He lives in San Francisco, I live in Glendale. How the hell does he know how does he know I'm drinking? But I got that figured out. I have a quick study, It's my mother. She lives in Wisconsin, 2,000 miles away, and she can smell whiskey on me 2,000 miles away. And she'd call him up and say, Bob's drinking again. Yeah. Then he'd call weeks later and he'd ask me this question that all non-alcoholics talk to alcoholics about. He actually had the nerve to say this. He would say, why don't you just quit? And you understand that? I couldn't. I thought, there's something wrong with this guy, I couldn't explain to him then, and I still can't today, that I got to have a drink now, right now, or I'm going to flip around the room, And he don't understand that. He still doesn't today. And so I don't know how much time we got here. Are you going to tell us?
You're going for a little bit, yeah.
Okay. So
I'm the embryo. I can't tell anybody anything.
But I want to, before I forget, I want to thank Mike for asking me to be on this panel, and Jim. And we put our heads together and almost came up with something else, And I've been around long enough to remember these people. These were the people that were here before when I came here. And God Almighty, there were some that a lot of them are gone. A lot of them are gone. And but there were people there that really cared whether I lived or died. And I think that's what we have to offer the sick alcoholic. We can offer him help, and that he don't have to die drunk. Because I knew the next time I go out there, I'm going to die drunk. My last drunk, I was living in abandoned cars, drinking rot-gut wine, and the abandoned car was mine, I never knew this until I got sober, Abandoned cars, the tires were flat, the battery's dead, it's out of gas. But the big thing is it was 6 months behind in payments. Then legally, it's an abandoned car. Once you don't make the payments for 6 months, it's an abandoned car. I didn't know that. I didn't know that legally. And so I'm living in abandoned cars. My car. That scared me. And there was 4 of us in there. And I don't know, one morning, the guy Pete was one of those smart guys you meet in bars. You bar drinkers know what I'm talking about. That's that guy or gal who sits down there at the end of the bar and has the answer to every living subject in the world. And that was Pete. I mean, if you had marital problems and I had marital problems, he had the answers. If you had legal problems, he had the answers. If you had medical problems, he had the answers. If you had engineering problems, he had the answers. I thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I thought, how can one guy know so much about so many things? And this morning we all came to, and Pete didn't. And he had swallowed his tongue in an alcoholic convulsion that night. Never saw that before in my life. And a little voice went off in my head that night, and it said, Bob, you're next. And it scared the living bejesus out of me. Scared the living bejesus out of me. I got to be living in abandoned cars as a result of a lot of other drinking before me. I'm an ex-cop, and they took that badge and gun away from me a long time ago as a result of another drunken fracas, Bunch of cops and our wives having a party, And I'm in the kitchen where all the booze is. And she comes in the kitchen and says, "We're leaving." And I said, "We just got here." At least it seemed like that to me. And she looked at me with them cold Al-Anon eyes and says, "We're leaving." And I don't know to this day how she got the keys. Because it's like everybody else here. It's my car, I drive, right? And she had the keys and we left. And on the way home she started bad-mouthing me. And this whole thing is in the book. Talks about this in the book. It says that you and I, who are real alcoholics, go through life with blinders on us like they put on horses, and we don't see anything that way, and we don't see anything that way. It's our way or no way. We're very selfish individuals. And she's yakking away and telling me these god-awful truths I don't want to hear, and I shut it all off, because we're born with a switch, you know. We're the only people in the world with a switch. And when people are telling us these god-awful truths we don't want to hear, we just push the switch. And it don't even hit the eardrum. It just chew right over the top. And we got in the house and she wouldn't shut up. Made sense to me, huh? And I said, I reached for the only thing I know would shut her up, a 38. I said, "Woman, I've heard all I'm ever going to hear from you about my drinking. I'll blow your damn brains out." And she took off like a deer. Chew! Out the front door of that house, 6 blocks down the street, to the only place she knew she could get help, right? The sheriff's office that I work at. And I'd have got her, too, if she'd just slowed down. And you'd have a different speaker here today, too. I'd probably be up there walking the walk and talking the talk. Thank God. Thank God. There has to be a God, because I left to my own devices, I'd have pulled the trigger. And I came out of that blackout standing in the middle of the sheriff's office at 3 o'clock in the morning with a 38 in my hand, going to kill somebody. And all the guys are standing around the squad room, and they're all looking at me kind of funny. Yeah. You know how your family, friends, loved ones, fellow workers look at you when you're drunk and a skunk? They kind of look down their nose at you like you're some kind of second-class citizen or something. I can't even describe it. But I'll tell you what, if any of you don't know what I'm talking about right this second, you do not belong here. Those people near and dear to us really look at us funny when we're drunk and a skunk. And they're all looking at me kind of funny. And then the boss, the elected sheriff of that county, come walking in the squad room. And he looked at those guys coming off the late shift, talking about all the crap that happened last night. And then he looked at me. And he and I are like this, really thick. And he and my dad's a cop. And they're buddies. And that whole law enforcement deal is a buddy-buddy system. And he looked at me, and I know he had a heck of a time with it. And he held out his hand and says, "Bob, hand it over, the badge and the gun." And he took it all away. Took away that badge, that gun, and that uniform, and had a face that were all bare naked. It's too much for a normal person, much less a drunk like me. So at the age of 31, I did the most adult, mature thing I could think of. I ran away from home. If there's any runners here tonight, I want to talk to you outside after the meeting. But I'll tell you what, no matter where I go in this country or any other country, these rooms are full of runners. Do you know that? Running to something, running from something. And every runner who's ever come to Alcoholics Anonymous, including me, we all forgot one thing, and we all forgot the same identical thing. And that is, no matter where you're running to or running from, you forgot it, I forgot it. I had to bring me along, and you had to bring you along. And you is the problem, and me is the problem. And you can't make this thing alone, and I can't make this thing alone. But together we can make it. And that's the miracle it talks about in our book. One drunk talking to another, and it works. Works to the tune of over 3 million sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's good enough for me, man. That's good enough for me. So I am eternally grateful for my time in this outfit and some of the people I've come to know in this outfit. And you know what? Over the years, in all my travels, some of the finest people I've ever met in my life all turned out to be sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Isn't that a kick? All turned out to be sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's a bunch of them here today. And I'm twice blessed, you know. And I can't tell you just how much it all means to me. But there's always a little thing I have to throw in here about that woman that put up with that crap. Got chased by a drunk cop. And the 23rd of November 2001, she was diagnosed with cancer, melanoma cancer. And she was gone in 30 days. On the 23rd of December, God came and took her from me. And 3 weeks short of 54 years married. So she put up with a lot of crap. And my life has changed. My life has entirely changed. And that day, the kids were taking all the calls, and I don't know how the people found out, but from all over this continent, they started calling. I don't know how they found out. And before I left today, one of the guys from Canada, Crandall, you here? Yeah, one of the guys from Canada called me today just to say, how are you, Bob? Just checking on you. I don't know of another outfit in the world that people do that. They really care whether you make this thing or not. But for all you guys, all you macho guys, I want to tell you something that I entirely missed in all the years we were married. And now I know it. It's another fact of life. That women, and only women, can make a house a home. Men cannot do that. So today I live in a house again. And it's the pits. It's the living pits. And so I am eternally grateful. But there's a guy sitting here today who kind of saved my can again. And he introduced me to some gal. And things are looking up. I thought it was all over. But it ain't. And so I'm eternally grateful for people doing little favors like that, you know. He didn't have to do that, you know. He didn't have to do that. But he did. And so everything's working out fine. And so I really, for an old goat like me, I think there's a little hope left. There might be silver on the top, but there's a little fire in the hearth yet. Joe will talk about that too. And so I guess you've heard enough about me. I am eternally grateful just to be a part of this thing, you know. You people saved my life, and so I really owe you a lot. I'm really indebted to the people of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Johnny.
Thank you. My name is John AKERLUND. I'm an alcoholic. And I am enthusiastic about this program. I'm very grateful for this way of life. It's terrific most of the time, you know. And thanks for the invitation. And 1st of October, I was 45 years sober by the grace of God. And I'm forever grateful. And, to tell you how old that is, it really... Many years ago, I was invited to Rye, New York. It was a bicentennial meeting, and Ray O'Keefe, a Superior Court judge, ran that meeting. And when I came there, and Lois Wilson was there, our co-founder's wife, and Jim Burwell, who wrote the chapter Agnostic and Big Book, was there, and it kind of aged me a little bit, you know. All of us here, we sure grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous together, and they're very dear to me. first time Bob and I were together, he was 12, had his 12th-year birthday, and I was invited to speak in Glendale. And those days it was like, you don't save any souls after 10, buddy, you know. And Bob, you know, he's a full-blooded German. I had a little problem with the Germans during the war, you know. I was in the Royal Air Force for 2.5 years, and you know, and he kind of talked funny then. You know, he's actually born, he has more of an accent than I have. He must practice every night or something. You know, it was 10 o'clock and I had a minute and a half to wrap up my story, and Bob's sister out the door there and shout, "John, for God's sake, it's 10? So, Lemke, this is only an AA meeting. We ain't marching into Poland tonight. You know? John Keefe, he put the roof on my house in Laguna Beach, and I love him dearly. We have been together many times. You know, my wife Karen, I met her in Stockholm during the Second World War. She was 17 years old, and I had gone to college a couple of years and went in the Air Force. But anyhow, it was terrific right from the start. The 2nd of April this year, we had married 60 years. And it was nip and tuck a few times, you know. But the first time, she had 44 years of sobriety. She belonged to Elsa Chamberlain's Al-Anon group that she started in her home 49 years ago. And Karen should have an Al-Anon birthday. And she said, "I'm going to have my birthday in Al-Anon," so I thought I was going to be funny. So I said, "How do you count your birthday in Al-Anon? When you first come in or when you actually surrender?" You know. And she said, "We counted from the first day we kicked you son of a bitches out of the house." You know, for the record, my grandfather, he died from alcoholic delirium in 1908. He lived in a 2,000-acre place outside Stockholm. They were breeding racehorses. They were beautiful people. But he died from alcoholic delirium. My father, 1927, started a problem with his liver. And he died 3 years later from cirrhosis of the liver. And I was 8 years old, and it was just terrifying to see him the last few. He was a 200 and some pound guy. And when he died, he weighed 130 pounds and was yelling. It was terrible. My older brother was brilliant and spoke 6 languages fluently, graduated from 3 universities and very successful. For 18 years he battled this thing. And he carried a Swedish flag in the Olympics 3 times, and he was a hell of a guy. But he died from this disease in the prime of his life. And my younger brother, he had been for scripts 30 years ago, and they said, "Your liver is shot, you can't drink no more." He's still drinking. That's you and I are the lucky ones because of the evidences in these rooms, and so on. And I didn't start to drink until I was 31 years old because I had promised my grandmother I was never going to drink due to the fact of my father and so on. But I tell you, when I started to drink, I was working for a door factory in Alhambra. My boss was alcoholic and he wanted to have somebody to drink with. It was hard to get a job. I'm a legitimate immigrant, and I have been in the building business for 53 years. And I lived in Laguna Beach for 36 years. And then I bought a little condominium in Laguna Woods a few years ago. And, it's kind of strange to be my age group. I'm 86 years old, and I work full time, and I have a 30-year loan. The guy who approved the loan, if he would take an honest inventory, he would realize that optimism is one of his defects of character. You know, and when I started to drink alcohol, it was the finest thing that ever happened to me. I needed a drink long before I started to drink. For 3 years, it was fantastic. You know, I had a wonderful time. And then my wife ran out of humor. And for 7 years, she tried to tell me I was alcoholic, and I tried to prove to her I was not. And booze was not my problem, you know. You know, and so I drank a fifth from booze from day one. 2-3 years into my drinking, I was up 2/5 of whiskey a day. The last 2 years I drank, I couldn't drink whiskey right away in the morning, but I drank around the clock, so I had to discover codeine cough medicine. The last 2 years I drank, I had 2.5 pints of codeine cough medicine every day, 2 3/5 of whiskey every day, and 6 anisines 4 times a day. I was weirder than hell, you know. It was really a son of a bitch, you know. And you know that when I stopped drinking, then I got the shakes. So if I took a couple of shots of booze, it stopped the shakes. So then I had to say that I have to drink all the time because I worked all the time, you know. And I tell you, when I drank alcohol, I felt I was normal, you know. And then, you know, that those last 2 years, I had this 23-foot snake that chased me around the room when I stopped drinking, you know. And, you know, and I can't believe it, he was 23 feet long, you know. And he came slowly across the room, stopped in front of my face, and started to hiss at me. And he smelled like death, you know. And, you know, my experience with the snake was this, that the closer he came, the more I screamed. And the noise in my head for my own scream reached such a crescendo that my brain exploded for my own. That's my experience. My wife, Karen, said in the mornings that something strange happened this morning around 4 o'clock. She said you sat straight up in bed, looked in front of you for quite a while, and then you said, "Ee!" One night I made leftovers, she wasn't even there. And that's kind of tricky. She was actually laying 2 feet away from me down. She said, "What are you doing over there?" I said, "I pick up." And when she realized what's going on, she started to laugh at me, you know, and I started to cry. I felt it was humiliating to laugh at the guy who was doing his best, you know. You know, I tried a few things before I came into AA to get sober. I went to a minister for counseling every week for an hour for 18 months. And he realized after a period of time that we lacked identification and I had to find my bottom further down. So he said, "Yes, I go to a psychiatrist." I spent $2,000 with this guy. There wasn't anything he said to me that my wife didn't tell me for free 3 times a day. You know? And everything he said to me was actually the truth. One time he said, "You know what's wrong with you?" And I said, "Tell me." And he told it all my secrets and all my emotional problems. And I said, "Doctor, you're absolutely right. And that's why I drink. I can't stand myself." 2 days before I came into AA, I was picked up at the Thrifty Mart trying to steal a pint of liquor for $3.57. And you should have seen me then. I was drunk and unshaven. I weighed 246 pounds, and I couldn't even defend myself. You know, I grew up in the most lovely circumstances. My home was a big home. We had a tennis court in the backyard. We had 2 nurses dressed in bathers till I was 12 years old. And it was exquisite living. That day I looked exactly like a person I should steal a pint of liquor to live. The next day I came into one of my best accounting men. I'm the secretary. I said, "I saw you in the market yesterday." You know, I just didn't bother to, I said a 4-letter word and walked out of it. There was nothing left. And then came this thing. My wife says to me one day that if you don't go down and try that thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, your sponsor, your minister I talked about, you have to move out. So I went down to the Ilona Club in Anaheim. And they asked me there was a lady there said, "Do you have a drinking problem?" I said, "No. Get along as famous. Can you do something for my wife? She's crazy." I'll tell you another thing. If I had known how sick I was, I would never stayed. Stopping drinking wouldn't have fixed that. I had $36,000 worth of unpaid bills. I realized I'd broken my wife's spirit the way I mouthed back to her when she mouthed off to me, and it was terrible. And so this guy got hold of me. Charlie Vick was his name. He became my sponsor, and he told me his story. I realized he's worse than I were. And he needs to more, and he is sober. I said, you really were that bad? And I said, well, you don't understand. When I stop drinking, I get the shakes and that snake and weird things and things like that. I said, Charlie, that's how it is when I stop. And then he said a magic. He said, you will only shake for 4 or 5 days, and then you never have to shake again as long as you live. And then I broke, and I said, please, show me what to do. And I was in a meeting that night, and I said, please, God, help me today to stay sober. It was not a big deal. I always thought the spiritual experience would be something like, yes, John, what can I do for you, Not like that at all. But my thoughts were perhaps after all this, there's a way for me too. I came home that night, and I said to my wife, I said, I don't have to drink anymore. And she said, your eyes look different. I had 10 days of sobriety. I came to a stag meeting and blurted out. I said, I feel so goddamn guilty. And an old timer, he said, the reason you feel so guilty is because you're guilty. Now we have to deal with that. So now I'm guilty, but I don't have to drink over it. I had 2 weeks of sobriety. I came home after a meeting, and I lay down, thought to my bed, and meditated a little bit. And I said, something is going on in these rooms. Something is going on in these rooms. If there anybody new here, I hope you stay long enough to have that experience. I still get the goosebumps. I had 6, and when that the first night there when I had copped out, I said, why did I tell them? Now they know. And I said, that's stupid, I tell them about it. And then we read the Lord's Prayer. And then after the prayer, this guy walks up to me and put his arm around me and said, Johnny, everything is going to be all right. And I believed him. I haven't walked alone since. Then I had 60 days of sobriety. When you have 60 days of sobriety, those days we sometimes say, come home to me and have a cup of coffee and a Coke, and we continue the meeting. So I asked these guys, I said, come home to me. I had a beautiful home with a swimming pool, they came home there, and we talked about what a great meeting we had had and all that. And my wife she was not happy at all. Came out with this big cardboard box, put it on the living room table. There was all those bills, $36,000 worth of bills, And she said, yes, I know you guys are absolutely frickin' terrific, but what in the hell are we going to do with these, And my sponsor said, Johnny, you got to go to work. I said, you mean without nothing? He said, without nothing. I said, I can't do it. He was at my door the next morning. I said, we are going. And he drives down to Bad Dijkstra Drake, and I never told him about that contractor. The secretary saw me picked up trying to steal the liquor, I thought if I tell him, he might fire me, So he says, get your ass in there and give them a bid. I go in down, there's Helen behind the desk, and she looked disgusted. So I said, may I give you a bid? And she says, over there in the corner. So I go a 2-8-unit apartment, being frames, jams, doors, waters, finished lumber, and so on. And I went over to her desk, and I said, thank you for letting me give you a bid. And then she looked up at me, and her face completely changed. And he just became tranquil, and she said, oh, my God, you ain't drinking anymore. I said, Helen, I have 60 days, And Charlie stayed with me for 90 days until I had enough galls to work on my own, And so that night, the 60 days sobriety, I had a bite to eat and went to my meeting. I had a reprieve for an hour and a half, and I come home. Should have a bite to eat before I go to my meeting. There was 25 phone calls about the people I owed the money to. I had no money, no income. I couldn't write them a check for 36 grand as they get out of my head, So I called my sponsor. I said, Charlie, they want my money. And he said, no, they want their money. I tell you what I did. I went on a budget, and I worked every day. I stayed sober every day. I went to a meeting every day, and I bought money orders twice a month, and it took me 3.5 years to pay back that $36,000. And it was very important to me to make those financial amends, you know. It was a big day in me. It's a beautiful thing, what's going on in these rooms. And so what is these moments of clarity to me? It's the music in AA. And you all knew, do this, do what we do. Don't drink and come to meetings. It's the best deal in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. And up next is Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Harkins, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Joe. They just brought me along to dress pretty. Lighten it up. You know, I could tell you briefly what it used to be like and what happened and what it's like now. But I'd like to tell you about my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was on Hoxie Street in Norwalk. And I had been living with a man who was seeing things while drunk. It was pretty bad shape. And I called AA for him. I knew all about you people. I'd seen you, talked to you, lived with you. My mother came to AA in 1948. And so I knew what was here. And this guy made 12-step call on Jake. And after he left those silly little 20 questions. And I got down where I was alone, where nobody could see. And I read him and checked him, 18. And that was not even being honest. And so I went to my first meeting. And I walked into a room. A man had just gotten out of prison for 21 years for murder. I'd never been in a room with anybody who'd even been in jail that I knew of. And a lady got up and she said she'd came to AA 5 years ago, and with her husband and children and a home, and everything was just beautiful. But she drank again, and now she was back with no kids, no husband, and no home. Another guy got up and he talked about, his name was Fred, and he got up and he talked about the disease of alcoholism. And you know, it was like somebody had lifted the whole world off of my shoulder, because I thought I was rotten, no good. I'd been called every name in the book. I was sick, and it was okay. It was okay. Then this crazy little lady come up to me, and she says, "What does your God look like?" And I says, well, he's about a little taller than me, and he's got brown hair and brown eyes. She says, "Oh, mine's very tall and strong, and he's got blue eyes." And today I know she gave me that minute, that night, a God as I understand it. And I had come to AA with a 3-year-old daughter that I had adopted illegally because this guy needed a baby, and I was going to give him a baby, and so I found somebody that had a baby to give away, and so I got her. Consequently, he took off with some 18-year-old and left me with the kid, which God in his infinite wisdom knew was what was just right for me, because it was that little girl that gave me the courage to get up every day and go to work. To backtrack a little, prior to getting into AA, I had got fired from my last job because I drank a little too much, and I worked in the cocktail lounge. And he told me that I just wasn't, the right person to be there. And he fired me, so I'd heard about people living off of welfare, and I thought, that's for me. So I go traipsing off to the unemployment office, all set to sit back and relax and collect all this money. By the time she got through with me, I got $13 a week. I said, I can't live on that. And she says, you're not supposed to. So I says, well, I ain't going back working no damn bar. I says, I'm tired of my titties being pinched, my butt being pinched. And I says, I just can't go back. And she says, well, Rockwell's hiring. That was North American Aviation at that time. And I said, oh, I know where that is. So I go traipsing over to this place over off of Anaheim Street, and they said, oh, no, we don't hire nobody here. Go over to Downey. So I went over to Downey, and they got an application blank they wanted. So I got home, and I started filling it out. My God, they wanted to know where I'd been for the last 10 years. I had moved so fast out from paying the rent that I didn't even know where I'd lived. And so my daughter, she kind of helped me with my income tax of where I was when I had to file income tax, and just, she kind of helped me. So anyhow, when I went back to Rockwell, I'd been married quite a few times. Now, I wasn't against going to bed with anybody, but I wanted a ring on my finger. And so I had gotten married quite a few times. So she's making out this application, and the name changes and everything, and she was a real young girl, and she'd type a little bit, and she'd look up at me, and she'd type a little bit and look up at me. But God bless her heart, God put her in my life because she made all my dates coordinate so that they all matched. So then they got me in the office, and they said, well, I had put down that I crocheted and embroidered on this application. And did leather tooling. You'd make a good solder. So they put me in to electronics, and I stayed there for 30 years. The grace of God. Didn't know nothing about benefits. Didn't know nothing about insurance. I just went to work. I was making $1.25 an hour, and that was really hot stuff. So then, but I had this little problem. I couldn't sleep, and I was real nervous, and I was drinking as much as I could afford to drink. Now, I couldn't afford to drink very much, but anyhow, I had these pills. The doctor prescribed them so that I could go to sleep. And then I was kind of fat. I weighed 200 pounds. I was kind of fat, so he gave me these pills so I wouldn't be hungry. And now I know they were Bennies. They were Speed. Now, I got real busy. I could paint a room, just real busy. And I was shaking, so he had to give me some Milltown to calm me down. And somehow or other, I stayed there until June 6, 1960. The grace of God. Some of the fellows that worked there helped me keep my job. And June 6th of 1960, I went to my first AA meeting, and that was when I met Ellen, my crazy, crazy sponsor. And every time I say her name, the angels ring bells in heaven because she saved my life. She was crazy. She was erratic. She never said, what step are you working, honey? You got to do your fifth step. You got to do this. You got to do that. She never said anything like that to me. I was living with this guy, and I had Donna Joe farmed out. I had met this guy, and I told him I'd marry him for 2 bits, and he gave me the 2 bits, and I married him. Ended up, his family took care of my little girl that I had gotten. So, anyhow, I was in such a mess. I just was crazy, just absolutely crazy. And so I decided that I couldn't stay sober, so I took all my literature and my big book and all the stuff I had, and I took it back up to my sponsor, to Ellen, told her I was going to turn it in, I was going to drink. because I knew I couldn't stay sober and live with this man, and I wanted to live with this man more than I wanted anything. And Ellen said, my, he must be a wonderful man. Oh, he is. Yes. Oh, he must just sacrifice many things for you. I says, he does. She went on and on about how goddamn good he was, and by the time I got out to the car, I went home, packed his clothes, threw him out. That's how she worked the program on me. And I thank you, and I thank you for asking me, sir, and I thank my buddy for putting me up here. Thank you very much.
My name's John. I'm alcoholic. In fact, I'm the only one in this room looked like he ever drank. I got, usually this is a deed and honor with all the sobriety that's here. I'm more or less, I don't know if what I got is called sobriety, but I think it's called scared spitless drink again. You know, I was really a poop out. I didn't last very long. And, because when I come in AA, everybody had drank for 40 years and stole locomotives and that kind of story. And they were what was called pure alcoholics. These people drank white lightning, booze, whatever. I was an impure alcoholic. Elixir, the rest of that is elixir of terpenhydrate codeine. And I drank a lot of cough medicine, you know. And I drank so much cough medicine, I actually haven't coughed for 50 years. That's, you know, I'll probably go into a coughing fit. God has a way of getting even with smartasses, you know. Yeah, so I'll take that back. And anyway, I've been celebrated 50 years. That's a big deal. I don't know why they didn't do anything for me on 49, but all of a sudden 50 years, you know. And so Keith Drum went through a party for me in Orange County, and it was more like a roast. It was a roast. And then L.A. County, Pomona, the Triangle Club, where I spent a lot of time there, they had a party for me. And then, of course, Chino went and pulled out all the stops, because I'm from, I was from Chino, and then they made where I live called Chino Hills, because we're about 50 feet higher in elevation than Chino. And we now look down on the people in Chino, you know. But anyway, so a big blowout. People come in from all over and told me I had touched a lot of lives and all that, you know. But basically, let me tell you something. I'm in AA because I'm a sneaky rat that knows that if I drink again, I'm going to get toasted. And so I stay close to you people to be reminded, you know. These guys here, these guys are, I always usually start the convention if I get invited, which is rare, but when I do, I have the opening Friday nighter, and that's sort of like a warm-up guy for the heavyweights coming on, and that way the people will say, "Jesus, what was that all about?" And the person that took them would say, "It'll get better." So I'm the warm-up man, you know. And I've had a lot of fun with you people. I tell you, alkies are weird, but I really love them, and they're different. You know, they're very different. I've seen the tragic things too. This one guy named Gene McCune called up Red Sims, his sponsor, and he'd had it with couldn't quit drinking, and told Red, he says, I've got a gun, and I'm going to shoot myself through the brain. And Red says, Gene, you'll never hit a target that small. And Gene McCune got so angry. He said, well, the first shot's going to be for you. So, and then I've seen what was the guy that tried to commit suicide by putting his head in the oven, and it turned out it was an electric stove. But but I've seen the tragic part too. We do a lot of laughing, but in the days that I got sober, there was no insurance for drunkenness, and we used to. I got put in a place called the Harmony House. It was an old house out in the middle of an orange grove. This place looked like the Adams Mansion, and I come in there, and they take your clothes, give you a bathrobe. This bathrobe would have fit Billy Barty. I mean, I was weighing like 300 pounds, and more of me was hanging out than was in, And then we sat on these old couches, and we played, a big one was cribbage. And then also there was books about romance. No writing in them, but anyway, there was... So 10 days in a bathrobe, they give you your clothes back and make you a counselor. So I become a counselor, and I'm dealing with some really raunchy drunks, believe me. And some of them were in there because they're supposed to go to court for drunk driving and that, and they'd hide out in the Harmony House, and there was no harmony in that house. There was a lot of freaks in there, believe me. I said, leave the lights on. There's somebody coming into this room at night and groping me. But anyway, I said, leave the lights on, please. But anyway, it was a real ball. I had anyway, and the guy that run the place could have run a prison camp in Nazi Germany. Just really rude and crude, and not sensitive. And one day I'm sitting there in a chair counseling somebody, and this guy trying to borrow my turpentine hydrate, and anyway, my mom comes, dear old mom comes, and she came, believe it or not, listen to this, she would come to the Harmony House and pick up my dirty clothes. And my mom, I don't know if she ever told anybody she ever loved them, but she did it by cooking for you and cleaning for you, and so she came and had some papers and said, these papers were delivered to my house because your wife Florence don't know where you're at. And I said, what does the papers say? She said, the papers say that you're being divorced. I said, being divorced? For what? She says, it says here, intemperance. Intemperance. I didn't even know what that meant. Of course, I've been drunker than a skunk every day in our marriage, or taking drugs. And I had a job. It was a snap. I looked at, I'd go to work and I'd look at gauges, boiler. I run boilers. And all you got to do is make sure that the water stays in the sight glass. And that's all I had to do. And I took booze with me. But habitual intemperance. I never heard of anybody ever being divorced for that. But I was. Had a little girl, 3 years old. Well, wait a minute. You're going to take my little girl from me. And never gone. And I never raised that little girl. She's in the program now. And I've been, these guys here are my heroes. They've stayed married to the same woman. And I was on number 3, and she just bailed. So anyway, she can't get rid of me, though. We're still together. But she's not a happy camper with me. But anyway, we got, how many kids? She had 2 little boys. I got them raised, but I always come back to booze. And my last drink was something called Pride of Cucamonga. And I'd go down to the liquor store and line up with the rest of the bums, and Jay's liquor store, sometimes he wouldn't open up until 5 after 6. That's not right. And I'd be looking in the window, and he's counting the money. Not my money, I was on credit. But anyway, and I end up stiffing him anyhow. But anyway, and then I'd walk in there and with the rest of the bums, and I'd say, Jay, could you recommend a wine that would go with lasagna? I hadn't eaten for 30 days. And he would say, well, John, a light, a vin rosé. And all the time I'm digging in this damn sales bin. They had stuff they couldn't sell, and they'd throw it into a big bin. And apricot brandy, all that stuff to tear your buns off. But anyway, down in there was my favorite. It was called Pride of Cucamonga. And that guy told me, I come from an area where we have a lot of wine connoisseurs. And a guy told me, he said, hey, you know, that crap you're drinking, never seen a grape. He said they get down to the last press, the 5th press, and all that's left is seeds, stems, skins, and maybe a couple of rodents that fell into it, and they press it one more time. And then they zing it with ether, which is alcohol, to get it's got to read 20% by volume. That's why I'm wearing glasses now, is reading that fine print. I did not want to get anything that was 12%. So 20% by volume. Nifty drink, caused my lips to peel, that's the only thing. And I used to wet my pants a lot. So I was wondering why I couldn't get a date. Anyway, when the AAs finally got a hold of me, good people, Deke Ken and Kenny Hamilton, took me into their family, and I know I went over one day, I was sober a year, and I went over to pick up my little girl. I got her every Sunday, and there was a sign on the door. I've gotten married again, and Darlene is with my mother. And so I was crushed, and I said, yeah, to hell with this AA stuff and all that. I'm going to go out and get sloshed, you know. But I went over to my sponsor. His name was Kenny Hamilton. He was a Wheat Dakota wheat farmer that had drank up the farm and ended up in California. I went over to Kenny and I said, Kenny, can I talk to you? And he said, shh, be quiet, the Dodgers are on. Just sit there and watch the game. And I said, well, I got something I want to share with you. He said, after the game's over with. And so I watched the game, and I talked to Kenny afterwards. And he didn't have any pearls of wisdom. But you know what? I didn't want to drink anymore. Isn't that funny, the magic that we have? Just with another alcoholic, you know. There's a certain something going on, maybe identification. You know the other guy went through the meat grinder. And anyway, I'm about to wrap this thing up. I got on the 50-year birthday, I got a card, really a professional-looking card, and I read it, and I think it come from Dog on the Roof guys. There's no respect coming from them at all. And it said, congratulations on 50 years of undetected drinking. And you know, I know it was a Dog on the Roof, you know. And then, I've had a beautiful trip with you people, and I know you carry me. You know, when you get my age and everything, I got a lot of people that carry me, spiritually, physically, any way you want to talk. I stay close to you. I got to hear you, got to see you, and I'm going to make it. You know, I'll make it today. I got AA watching me like a hawk, and Jay's liquor store sold to a Chinaman, so I'm not going to mess with him anymore. Boycott. And anyway, I've had a lot of fun with you people, but like I say, I usually do the warm up on Friday night. And then everybody says it's going to get better. We got some real speakers coming up, and you know, they get rid of that clown. But I go to meetings, go to the men's stag, and bunch of losers in there, and but we stay sober. And I answer the phone. I do very little for AA. When you stop and think about it, I do very little. Some of you men are really done service, great service. I answer the phone on Thursday night. I have Thursday night until the morning. Well, I couldn't sleep. I knew even after I died I'd be wide awake for 2 weeks. I could not sleep. And I'm always studying in the medicine cabinet, you know. And so I goes and I told the guy, I said, I don't want nighttime. Hey, I've got to go to work in the morning. I can't be up all night answering the phone. And he says, that's the only spot we got open. Are you going to be a service or what? I said, okay, I'll take it. But you know what? Find somebody else meanwhile. I'll fill in for a while. And I don't get that many calls anymore because of the Harmony houses, but they're more modern now, and they feed you and everything. And I got a guy that actually keeps a list of, it's like a 5-star, 3-star, 4-star. He actually keeps who's got the best food, you know. He goes, but anyway, the calls I get, and you know, the second chapter is about the only one that I really hang up on. I read a little bit of it every morning. The second chapter says a solution. A solution. They're spelling it out. There is a solution for a screwball like me. And the solution is stay close. So I was a merchant seaman for 5-6 years, and I never was on a ship that sunk, although it could have been. I was down in the engine room tending boilers, and it used to scare me when I sobered up thinking about it. But anyway, stay in the lifeboat. There's a lifeboat. AA is a lifeboat. And if somebody reaches for you, you're tired of swimming, grab onto them, get in the boat. You won't understand what the hell they're talking about. And when you get in the boat, don't try to become captain. There's a whole bunch in there already think they're captain, you know. And just get in there. And I used to say, grab an oar. And old Ralph, he couldn't hear good. He said, where is she? And I said, wait a minute. I used to tell Ralph, knock it off, you know, but anyway. But stay close to the edge where you can reach for somebody else. And that's what AA was for me. Someone reached for me. I was tired of swimming. And they got me in the boat, and I stayed in the boat. So the calls I get are people wanting directions, people calling for other alcoholics, my husband, you know, my boyfriend, whatever. I got one guy that wants me to go to the sheriff's office and help him get his guns back. He calls once a month on a full moon night, and I tell him, hey, you know what, you try to commit suicide, that's a 5150. You're not going to get your guns back. I tell you, sheriffs are gun collectors. They're not going to give you your guns back. All them sheriffs have a ton of guns, but I tell you. And so he only calls once a month, though. And then I had a woman call and fell in love with me over the phone. And it was really going hot and heavy, you know. And I told her I was in my 70s, but she never slowed down. And I said, ma'am, you're going to have to go to a meeting, AA meeting, and you're going to have to find a sponsor. She said, I cannot relate with women. I said, I can't either. But I said, I got to stay sober. You know, this stuff was killing me. But anyway, that I don't get that many calls, mostly directions, how to get here, get there. And I love you people. It's my family. You people are my family. And I got guys now, I guess, because I'm an old geezer. I got these younger guys coming along with Keith Drum and his crew. They've been carrying me. And it's really satisfying. I mean, if I had sons, I got sons, but stepsons, and they do what they can. But the AAs are always there, give me a helping hand. And anyway, Jim, thank you. This has been great. I love you. And Jim even laughed, you know, and he's heard me so many times. But anyway, come on, take over, buddy. And I love you people. Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.